Yeah, the murder of Aisling Murphy was an absolutely unspeakable, horrific act, and I can only just imagine the grief that the family must be feeling, and our friends and our community, and I pass on my deepest sympathies to all of them. But I suppose against that background of an utterly unspeakable, senseless murder and tragedy, it has been very, very heartening to see the amazing response of people right across the country coming out on the vigils and insisting that we have to address the reasons that our society continues to produce this phenomena of violence and murder of women because they are women. I mean, violence of any description between humans is something that needs to be stamped out, but violence against women and the murder of women because they are a woman is a particularly horrendous thing. And I thought it was brilliant on the vigils how so many people were saying, of course, you know, the wheels of justice will have to grind out an explanation, punishment, and so on in terms of the individual case, but that everybody insisted that we had to look at ourselves and we had to look at our society and ask how is it that our society continued to produce this phenomena. And I certainly don't have all the answers. I don't think any individual does. But I think there are a few things that we can say, and I think the urgency people demand in addressing this phenomena and in taking measures to stamp this out and to change the culture, whatever it is about our society that produces this violence, to get to the root of it quickly and change things. But there are some things, and they've been alluded to. I mean, first of all, if you are in a relationship, and most domestic violence, as we know, takes place among people who know each other in the family home, it is self-evident that if you have nowhere to go, if you can't get out of where you live, your ability to escape that violence, the likelihood that that violence could end up with tragic consequences is greater. So it is a matter of absolute urgency that we provide the refuge places. I know in my area we don't have a women's refuge in the whole of Dún Laoghaire. The government have now committed, but it is worth saying that the issue of getting a refuge in Dún Laoghaire has been, people have been talking about it and campaigning for it as long as I was in representative politics, when I first got elected as a councillor, which is whatever it is, 12, 13 years ago, and we still don't have one. Still don't have one. And the housing situation more generally, because it's not just about refuge spaces, it is about alternative accommodation. And just one issue to highlight for the Minister is that even now, with cases I'm dealing with this minute, there are women in domestic violence situations who can't leave those situations because they are joint tenants with their partners, and therefore there's bureaucratic obstacles to them getting on the housing list because they're already tenants. And that's leading them not want to leave the house, even though they're in a situation of domestic violence. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. So those barriers have to be removed. And as long as we have a housing crisis, until we address it, women will be left trapped in these violent situations or in abusive situations. The other thing is obviously the question of objective sex education. And, you know, I mean, I don't have all the answers where this came from, right? But in a society, in a state, specifically the Irish state, where the state prevented people from having divorce for much of its history, of getting out of bad relationships, didn't want women to have control of their own bodies, where we had the horrific abuse, organised institutional abuse of women and children in the Magdalen laundries, in the mother and baby homes, and so on. Against that background, it is crazy that religious institutions with particular views of women, of sexuality and so on still control 90% of our schools, and have any control whatsoever over the sex education that is taught to our young people. So that issue has to be addressed as a matter of urgency, so people get factual, objective sex education, and we don't have religious bodies running the education of our schools that are not giving people the proper education they need.